This USAID thing that's going on, Mike Benz has been on that like a pit bull, and I've been following him on X.
Some of the biggest names in American politics are now caught in a massive scandal that reached federal court. After Elon Musk accused USAID of corruption and bad spending habits.
So, do you see it as a worthy cause, USAID?
We are moving fast, so we will make mistakes, but we'll also fix the mistakes very quickly.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio investigated the claims and compiled a list of those who were directly involved with the agency's biggest scandals. That list has now leaked online, and the names are so shocking that even Joe Rogan had to discuss them. What names were on this list, and why were they so surprising? Join us as we uncover the politicians involved in the USAID scandal.
When you look at USAID, that's a fraud. The whole thing is a fraud.
The leak and the scandal. When the USAID controversy began in late January, it was nothing more than a simple management issue. To most people back then, it hardly felt like a big deal, but over the weeks it grew into a political dumpster fire that never stops spreading until every politician gets caught in its destruction. It started right after Elon Musk called them out in early February for corruption and bad spending habits.
We don't have a fourth branch of government called Elon Musk, and that's going to become real clear.
This simple call to be held accountable quickly turned into a huge firestorm after Secretary of State Marco Rubio joined the fray. Marco announced that his team had started a deep investigation to find out how USAID was spending its money and the politicians who were involved in the agency's most suspicious activities. Needless to say, what Marco and his team found was shocking. When his team started investigating, many thought he was just trying to help save money for the rest of the year. They felt this way because Marco decided at first to cut only a few contracts for the year that were worth over $10 billion. He did this barely a week after he started the investigation, but all it took was a few more weeks for serious questions to arise. Where did all the money go? Why were the countries helped by the agency still facing the same problems after billions of dollars were spent? Who were the ones benefiting from these programs? And then came the big question: why are the same set of politicians always involved in the worst projects? After 6 weeks of looking at the money they spent and all the projects they did, Marco concluded that over 80% of the agency's programs weren't helping the United States. They needed to be shut down.
USAID has a history of sort of ignoring that and deciding that there's somehow a global charity separate from the national interest. These are taxpayer dollars.
On top of that, some reports tell us he put together a long list of politicians and celebrities who were involved in the agency's corrupt practices in foreign places. Marco allegedly did this based on what he found in the files uncovered by Elon's Department of Government Efficiency. USAID had allegedly used these popular figures as tokens to make themselves look good during times when most nations had stopped trusting them. With these politicians at the forefront, the few countries that still trusted them kept getting money with almost no questions asked, and most of the contracts were given with no clear plans for how to use the money. The rest of the cash each year was mostly given to companies that barely did anything. With so many things going wrong with USAID's operations, Marco Rubio started canceling these programs. Many people disagreed, and the matter went to court. The federal judge concluded that Marco Rubio didn't have the right to cancel the plans that were already approved by Congress. And that meant the money had to keep flowing, even though there was something wrong with the agency's spending habits. But there was more to this than meets the eye. Several problems came up when the contents of the leaks began to spread online with the names of many politicians who were linked to USAID's worst projects over the years. These names found in this list were so shocking that it blew the minds of all who heard about it, including the popular podcast host and comedian Joe Rogan. Over the years, he has spoken out about USAID and the need for them to be open about their spending and everyone who got involved in their projects.
This USAID thing, he explained it the last time he was here, and I don't think I really grasped it until Elon's.
As far as he knows, Marco's work was a success because it indirectly brought the names of these politicians to light. But before we look at these people and the relationship they allegedly had with USAID, please keep in mind that what we are about to show you is how the situation played out from Marco's perspective. This means, as far as the law is concerned, all the persons mentioned in this video are innocent until proven guilty. So with that said, let's get to it. Hillary Clinton. Beyond working in politics, Hillary Clinton has been heavily involved in USAID's activities for a long time. During her term as Secretary of State from 2009 to 2013, she supervised many foreign aid programs, and most of them were carried out by USAID. Unlike private foundations that provide lots of help to foreign nations, USAID does its work by using taxpayer money for its various projects. The latest accusations against Clinton are that most of the money used under her watch was directed to the pockets of political allies and wealthy helpers, instead of the poor communities they were meant for. And sadly, that wasn't all. Reports tell us that the only organizations that got funding during most of her time in that office were those supporting the Clinton Foundation. These groups were supposed to provide help for victims of disasters and patients who couldn't afford proper health care. But the problem was that a large amount of the money was spent on many other things before reaching those who needed it the most. Things like administrative costs, consultant fees, and travel expenses for USAID officials took a huge chunk of the money before it could go anywhere. A great example of this happened in Haiti way back in 2010. The country had just experienced a devastating earthquake.
Well, tonight, tensions are growing in Haiti, where more than 2,000 people were killed in a 7.2 earthquake followed by a tropical storm.
And the cost of repair is much more than their economy could afford. Under Clinton's watch, USAID sent billions of dollars to help them rebuild their country. The Clinton Foundation was involved in all of the activities, and many of the contracts for making repairs weren't signed by local engineers and contractors, but by foreign companies that had close ties with Hillary Clinton and her allies. Much of the aid money went in that direction, and thousands of people remained homeless for years. As for the work the contractors did, many projects were either abandoned or never taken off the ground. Those in charge of the money seemed to be the ones who benefited the most. Reports tell us that most of the homes and hospitals promised by USAID under Clinton were never built. The ones that were built weren't properly finished because the aid money was allegedly used to fund private meetings with leaders. Some claim that these meetings were carried out to push American policies in African and Latin American countries. In some cases, USAID allegedly stopped providing help until these conditions were met. Hillary Clinton responded to this claim by saying she worked very closely to help those in need during her time in office. Even though nothing proves she broke any laws, many argue that the way USAID carried out their operations under her watch was disgraceful. The backlash dragged the names of other famous people through the mud as well, and one of those persons was the co-founder of Microsoft, Bill Gates. Now this is where it gets interesting. These alleged accusations against Bill Gates came at a time when his public image was still recovering from the dramas of 2020. Before then, Bill Gates was known for a long time as a philanthropist, pumping billions of dollars to charity mainly through the Bill and Melinda Foundation. Through this, Bill Gates has improved healthcare in various nations around the world, especially under the watch of Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State. Or at least that is what we've been told. You see, from the moment Elon Musk started investigating USAID up until the recent leaks referred to by Joe Rogan, Bill's name kept coming up as a vital part of the issue, and the accusations began when USAID allegedly started granting huge sums of cash to his charity programs. The problem quickly went public when some reports claimed that the projects they funded were designed in a way that only helped greedy prescription companies rather than the sick people they were meant for. This is because, as far as the current reports are concerned, after over a decade of USAID getting involved in his foundation, the healthcare system in most of these places is still as bad as it ever was. A lot of people with terminal cases still cannot afford the treatment they need, and health insurance is almost non-existent in countries like Nigeria and Mozambique. Even though Bill's foundation has reportedly done some good, many reports say that they only cause more harm in the long run. Most of the health systems they establish in poor countries depend on expensive methods of treatment without providing better and cheaper options that work. Because of this, some governments in Africa and Asia allegedly felt pressured to sign agreements that required them to buy expensive treatment options from premium health companies, because the established systems built at the roots were too costly to begin with. This way, the ones who truly benefited were the higher-ups in the premium pharmaceutical companies who got richer because the African and Asian governments had no choice but to buy their expensive products. In the end, the wealthy higher-ups got richer while the sick and poor only got worse. The same problem went beyond healthcare into other sectors like agriculture and biotechnology. When it comes to agriculture, the foundation's biggest focus has been on creating better versions of crops that grow faster and produce more fruits. These better versions were known as genetically modified crops, And Bill's foundation spent millions of dollars, saw them as a potential means of fighting world hunger. The big idea was that the new versions of crops would provide over twice as much yield and make food cheaper and easier to get. The big problem was that the seeds for these crops provided by USAID were too expensive for the average farmer. Even if the farmers decided to make the seeds by themselves, the cost of the chemicals needed to make them work was also very expensive. Many supermarkets preferred selling products from genetically modified crops and stopped supporting local farmers. Because of this, the only ones who truly benefited were the large companies producing the expensive chemicals. These accusations were very believable because of USAID's reputation for helping poor people in the past. Though the money spent was meant for assisting the poor, most of it ended up in the pockets of big companies without reaching the rural communities they were meant for. This makes most of the projects carried out by Bill's foundation a waste as far as helping the needy is concerned. And just as it was with Oprah Winfrey, the timing of these problems matches almost perfectly with the time when many countries were going through major health emergencies. For example, we all remember the global disaster that came with 2020. All through the year, the leaders of many nations were under pressure to act quickly without taking time to count the cost and making sure everything was spent properly. And the big claim is that USAID used these projects to favor certain businesses in the name of foreign aid. They try to prove this by pointing at the negative effects USAID caused through its work with Bill's foundation. Instead of improving the healthcare system of developing countries, it only made treatment more difficult and more expensive. Instead of making life easier for lower-class farmers, it allegedly took their jobs away in favor of premium companies that sell expensive chemicals for improved crop products. Supporters claim that even though he had good intentions, he should have known about the many scandals that came with USAID getting involved in private charities. Bill Gates responded to the problem by denying all the accusations. He argued that his foundation has always been about improving the lives of others. None of them comes close to what you are about to see. John Kerry. From 2013 to 2017, one of the strongest voices against climate change and conservation was John Kerry.
The notion that somehow dealing with climate is coming at their expense. No, it's not.
Throughout the time he served as Secretary of State, he worked closely with USAID to make sure many of the projects focused on fighting global warming. Reports tell us that John Kerry worked very hard along with USAID to get various nations to agree with each other on what to do about climate change. And most of his focus was on the developing countries that relied too much on fossil fuels. That was all we knew back then as far as the media was concerned. But the recently leaked files had a lot more to say. According to reports, the records showed various times when money was spent badly, expensive projects failed, and many resources were misused. In some of the countries, a lot of the projects turned into big disasters, especially in places like Kenya and Haiti, where they did more harm to the environment. The solar farms that were built quickly stopped working because there weren't people there to keep things going. And the wind turbines were put in places where there wasn't enough wind to generate electricity. As a result, the villages that were promised electricity got close to nothing, and what they got only lasted a few years with no hope of repair. With USAID's help, John Kerry gave millions of dollars to conservation efforts in places like Brazil and Indonesia. The end goal was simple: stop cutting down forests and protect wildlife. But many landowners couldn't give up their property so easily. Some of them had already planned to build houses and start farms in these areas. Hearing that these lands were about to be taken away in exchange for a small financial sum didn't sit well, and most of them refused to give up their lands. How did they handle the difficult situation? By allegedly channeling a huge chunk of USAID's money to the local military who promised to protect the lands. This seemed like the best option available to keep the forests from getting harmed. But later on, it was revealed that all these people did was take over the land for themselves. And after doing that, they allowed people to cut down trees and hunt animals in those places in exchange for huge sums of cash. This was very painful for a lot of landowners who gave up their properties only to see them misused by corrupt people from the military. Worse yet, according to the records, some of these forests that were all allegedly protected were never endangered to begin with. If this was true, then it meant that the millions of dollars spent so far had been for nothing. Hardworking locals and farm owners were pushed away from using their lands, and it was all for nothing. Before news about this went public, many well-known figures admired what John Kerry was doing with USAID's help and wanted to be a part of it. And one of these people who later got dragged into controversy was Leonardo DiCaprio. How did he get involved in this mess? The answers are quite surprising. You see, beyond his good looks and acting skills, Leonardo DiCaprio is also known for his unique love and passion for the environment. Throughout his career, he has donated millions of dollars to fight climate change and protect forests around the world. His efforts to protect endangered animals from going away have been praised by scientists across the globe. But as you might expect at this point, everything turned bad when USAID started getting involved in his projects as well. After John Kerry and USAID began to publicly support Leonardo's foundation by funding the projects under his initiative, several cracks began to appear along the way. For one, some of the projects that were linked to Leonardo's foundation were partners with companies that had a long history of harming the environment. The records imply that these companies used programs that were backed up by USAID and Leonardo's foundation to make themselves look good. And they did this while also keeping up with harmful practices in other forests that weren't protected. All these companies did was allegedly take advantage of the system to make themselves look like they care about the environment without making any real change. It also didn't help that John Kerry and USAID only supported Leonardo's foundation at a time when global climate summits were putting pressure on the rest of the world to show action against climate change. Some experts believe that John Kerry took advantage of this, along with USAID, to support projects without giving leaders enough time to count the costs and plan for the complicated problems that come with legalizing conservation. Of course, nobody knows for sure whether this is true or not. Leonardo, as of the making of this video, has not responded directly to these accusations, but has always made it clear that his foundation's work was always about helping the planet. As far as he's concerned, how John Kerry and USAID failed to play their part in this is their story to tell, not his. So whether or not Leonardo knew about these issues and chose to focus on his part of the deal, his name is now tied to this growing controversy that is making people rethink how true conservation works compared to anything we've done in the past. Michelle Obama. The former First Lady's name has come up in the most recent discussions of politicians who are involved in the ongoing USAID scandal. Most of the claims with her name on them are related to her global education programs. From 2009 to 2017, she launched the Let Girls Learn initiative and later supported Oprah Winfrey in her Female Leadership Academy program in South Africa that launched earlier in 2007. The idea for both programs was to help young girls stay in school and give them a great chance at a much better future. USAID was the agency that was put in charge of most of the funds and resources for both initiatives. A few years passed and the problems started to emerge. Articles from 2016 showed that some schools that were funded by USAID under the Let Girls Learn initiative never received the supplies promised by Michelle and the staff members at the agency. On top of that, the few schools that did get help weren't satisfied either, as it was revealed that the money sent by USAID was given to contractors and engineers who either did a poor job or never finished their projects at all. More details allegedly came to light when Donald Trump became president in 2017 and decided to end the Let Girls Learn initiative. What was his reason for doing this? Well, according to an official statement, the leaders within the program were never open about their spending habits ever since it launched.
The Trump administration was all set to get rid of a program called Let Girls Learn.
The schools they supported in Ethiopia ended up having more problems than they had before USAID arrived. The meal programs approved by Michelle Obama to make sure every child had food at school never worked in the long run. By 2018, reports showed that large amounts of the food were either stolen or spoiled before reaching the students. Some local officials were accused of selling the food on the black market at a very high price, while the food that spoiled along the way only did so because of bad planning and slow execution. If that was all that allegedly happened, perhaps Michelle Obama wouldn't be in a much better spot today as far as USAID is concerned. But according to the leaked files, the story only gets worse from here. Through close association with Michelle Obama in promoting education with USAID's help, another big name that recently got caught up in this mess was Oprah Winfrey. This felt bad to a lot of people, as the popular show host had spent a lot of time trying to build a good public image through charity. Her work in Africa has been praised by many people, and her contribution to female education has made a big difference in those places. However, most of the problems mentioned in the leaked files point back to a major scandal that happened back in 2007 because of her association with USAID. That was the year when Oprah Winfrey launched the famous Leadership Academy for Girls in South Africa. This academy was launched in her name And it helped many young females get an education at a time when it wasn't very common. Many at first loved Oprah for granting those girls a chance at having a better future, but everything changed when USAID got involved. By the following year, many stories came up that accused Oprah of never being the person in charge of providing resources for the school. According to those sources, it was USAID that was granting everything the school needed to function. They claimed that Oprah Winfrey was just a name attached to the whole thing to make the program look better than it truly was. Why did they do this? Because even back then, people were not very comfortable with USAID's work in Africa. Some leaders at the time were concerned that the agents working for USAID were trying too hard to force their values on them. Some of these practices, were seen by the natives as sacred, and having foreigners try to take all that away in exchange for a small grant just didn't feel right. During that time, the agency was accused of using aid as a tool for gaining influence over foreign affairs, rather than helping people as it should. This made many wonder if USAID was truly about helping people or just forcing their beliefs on everyone. Cultural practices in rural countries, like bowing to greet elders, kneeling to welcome parents, and prostrating towards rulers, have allegedly been frowned upon by foreign officials with close ties to USAID. Some reports say that the agency pulls back its funding each time these countries refuse to change the way they operate in these areas, even during times of need. This difficult clash of values caused many people to think that Oprah Winfrey's alleged work in Africa had more to do with public relations than real charity. After all, by granting very huge sums of cash to a school connected to a celebrity, USAID may have hoped to promote its public image and justify how much money it spends by attaching the name of a celebrity that many people love and support. The problem got much worse when the leaked files explained that much of the money given by USAID under Oprah's name never got to those it was supposed to help. On top of that, some girls in the academy spoke out about how difficult it was to work and learn in school. The living conditions in these learning places were almost unbearable. Food always ran out as quickly as it came in, and many staff members who worked there were selfish and opportunistic. Some of the crimes these people were accused of are too vile to mention in this video, but made a lot of waves when they got exposed from the leaked files. The growing situation got so bad that Oprah Winfrey had to take direct action against these problems when she heard about the situation. But the timing of this scandal made people suspect Oprah knew all along that she was a pawn for USAID. They claimed that she knew the truth, but kept playing the part for added benefits until things got out of hand. The launch of Oprah's leadership school happened at the same time when USAID had increased the amount of money sent to Africa. Supporters of Oprah Winfrey allegedly admit that she should have tried to know more about what the projects were about and how the funds were managed within the academy. Her name and face were at the forefront of this mess, and USAID at this time already had a bad track record of corruption and bad spending habits. It gets much worse when we look at the stories of how most of the money was channeled to the pockets of greedy consultants who worked with the academy. Many more politicians and celebrities were caught up in this mess, but most of the other things found in the records were already known to the public. Among these were the Randall Tobias and Alan Gross scandals that happened before 2010 and the Harvard situation with Russia in the 90s. Randall Tobias was an important person who worked with USAID throughout the early 2000s, but he quit his job in 2007 when it was found that he used his influence within USAID for physical misconduct. This caused a wide stir because he was one of those who insisted that various groups getting money from the agency should never be involved in scandals like this. Alan Gross was someone who worked for USAID in the late 2000s. He was assigned by the agency to help people in Cuba get better access to the internet. When he arrived in Cuba and got to work, the government there thought he was an American spy and put him in prison. Leaders in the United States insisted that Alan was just an honest man doing his job. But the Cuban government refused because they were never told about it by USAID before he arrived with banned technology. Because of this, Alan Gross was put in jail for 5 years. During this time, Alan became sick and lost a lot of weight. He only got released when the US government was able to strike a good deal with the Cuban leaders. And all this happened because USAID allegedly failed to plan ahead. As of today, about 5,000 grants and contracts worth over $40 billion have been canceled by the US government. With permission granted by law, Marco Rubio's State Departments want to cut over 90% of the agency's programs and also lay off hundreds of workers in all related departments. Keep in mind that there is no legal action made against the new people allegedly mentioned in the leak, and none of them have either confirmed or denied getting involved in the controversies. What other politicians do you think were included in the list? Was there anyone we missed along the way? Let us know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Also, click on the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.